Welcome back to this episode of the Law of Relevancy podcast. Today, I am joined by Tye DeGrange. He is the founder and CEO of one of the most difficult areas of digital marketing, and that's his agency, Round Barn. And their agency specializes in performance and influencer marketing. Tye, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Cords. It's a pleasure and excited to jump in with you today.
It's kind of funny in reading and learning about your agency. My brain kept wanting to say Red Barn. Tell me the story of Round Barn.
Yeah, what a great question. So, I grew up on a ranch in Sonoma County, California, kind of an idyllic way to grow up. My folks were horse people and teaching people about horses, riding horses, training horses. And there just happened to be a round barn, literally a stone's throw from my home. It was a historic round barn called the Fountain Grove Round Barn. It did happen to be red as well. It was this beautiful old kind of relic of the past that isn't you don't see very often. It was unique. It was architecturally interesting. It almost became kind of a historic landmark for our neighborhood and our area. So that was a big inspiration. It also just so happens that my name DeGrange means from the barn, loosely translated in French. And it also just so happens that those barns were introduced for efficiency reasons, so that the farmers could get use the same amount of material but get more space out of them in the usage when they were implemented. So it's kind of interesting. It's a cool little symbol of my upbringing and my family, which I obviously cherish, and just growing up in that way. And sadly, we lost the barn in a big fire that kind of tore through that area, which was crazy. But we're keeping the dream alive, and we're doing cool things in the world of testing and for our clients. So that's kind of the whole shtick around it.
Well, that's a really good segue into the conversation around authenticity. When you
Yeah.
have a structure
Yep.
like that that was functionally might have been more difficult to make, but may have, had certain advantages over what we typically see with giant rectangle barns and things like that. And the why behind why somebody would do something like that. Like, tell us a little bit about your journey and your ability to connect with what is authentic, because it's a big part of influencer marketing when done right.
Yeah. What a great call out. So quick context, been in performance marketing for about 20 years. Round Barn Labs is about 10 years old. I actually came from a good, fortunate to have some really cool in-house experiences at places like eBay, Amazon, various startups in the Bay Area, venture-backed startups. A lot of learnings from those experiences. And I think I always kind of over-indexed on maximizing learnings and kind of being on the front curve of like what's coming out, what was challenging to me, what was a learning opportunity for me, and almost over-indexed there by default. Um, if you think about the T-shaped marketer framework, Brian Balfour has been great about kind of making that famous of like, where are you deepest? Affiliate kind of was where I was deepest. I had some programmatic, had some paid search, had some paid social, had some multi-channel marketing experience, all performance marketing focused. But one thing I learned about affiliate early on was like, that connection, it was a matchmaking game, right? You're kind of saying, okay, Nike, Barnes and Nobles, uh, such and such insurance company. You're partnering up with the best affiliates you can. And as the affiliate manager, as the marketer, the job, you're kind of trying to match those together. And so even in the affiliate world, it was important to kind of make sure that there's some authenticity and trust there, and some a match that makes sense for the brand. There's a match that makes sense for the affiliate. Oftentimes it's attractive because there's a performance-based payment model there, a commission payment or a cost per lead, depending on who you're working with. So over the years, you could kind of learn. There's a lot going on in affiliate. It's more of it can be a misunderstood performance marketing channel. In some ways, it's like its own channel. It's like multi-channels in itself. It's not just search. It's not just social. It's not just email. Well, it can be all of those things. And now sometimes people kind of include, influencer into that. So that's a little bit of how I think about it. Um, and we can kind of delve into different branches of that, which I think will get really interesting.
Yeah, I've always admired the people who've been really successful in affiliate marketing. I mean, it is a really spectacular thing when you can build a sustainable affiliate marketing practice. I've got a friend who lives in Colorado, and I think he spends about 100 grand a day on his Amex driving advertising to certain products he's sourcing out of China. And it's just literally, it's just him, and like his daughter is like a,
Yeah.
a college graphic design student or something, but he's been doing this for about 5 or 6 years steady. And it's just amazing to me because, you know, he might make 10%, but 10% on 100 grand, that's a lot of money every day.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly.
having those, just having your metrics just dialed in is really something. Plus, there's a when you're doing it right, there is a momentum and there's an inertia with your campaigns that you can build. And anyhow, it's just something I've always admired to see the people
Yeah.
who've done it well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll talk. So there's someone in my network who's kind of a fractional CMO in the Bay Area for consumer brands and just extremely highly respected. When we chatted multiple times when I was in the Bay Area about affiliate marketing and what it meant, and he would often say that some of the best performance marketing leaders he saw, some of the best performance marketers and kind of like growth people he saw were folks that came out of affiliate. I think some of the interesting aspects of it are, it is multi-channel, it's relationship based, it takes longer than just search and social itself. You get to pay out of that performance based model often, not always, or just sometimes like CPC or CPM or a flat fee element, which has gotten bigger and more important part of it because of the cost going up across the board. But there's this also element of like you're constantly looking for the next tactic. We talked a little bit about this earlier of like those waves of creative
Yeah.
tactics, those waves of channels.
Sure.
Some channels are brand new, some channels are stale, some channels are mature and expensive. Andrew Chen talks about this a lot in the Law of Shitty Click-Throughs. There's been multiple marketers and science-based thinking around the waves of these things that come and go, and I think it happens in everything from TV advertising to newspapers. But I would just say that affiliate is like there's a lot of like what's the latest and greatest in addition to kind of those best practices that I think are really interesting. And then to kind of just double down on your authenticity comment, I think you know the there's just a big gap in trust, right? We're seeing it across the board. You talk about authenticity. I think it behooves us to talk about what got us here. And it's this we don't trust in things like we used to, from everything from government to the marketing messages we have. And so, it's different for every individual and for different societies, but we certainly know it's trust has degraded for a lot of people. And it's the brands can no longer just rely on themselves to do the heavy lifting and the storytelling and the communication and the relationship with customers. Obviously, they have to do that. They have to have great product, great reviews. But this trust gap that I talk about and we're seeing in the data and across the board is really just making people very thirsty for being able for you and I to hop on a pod, being able for CEOs to have kind of like a little bit more ownership of the dialogue to their customers. Customers have way more access to everything, and including the CEOs and companies they're engaging in. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of a big emphasis of what we're seeing in the data and the performance and what people are wanting out of partner marketing, affiliate marketing, influencer marketing.
It is interesting, this whole conversation around trust, especially as it connects to your advertising, because performance, that whole approach where we're going to have these short-term money and performance cycles that we're going to have to sustain in order to make the initiative or the business successful. And so I love the fact that so many innovators have come out of the space, because you literally have to, because things do get stale and you're always testing. And I love that approach, because the other side is just the squishy branding stuff where it's like, hey, we're going to build trust through a trustworthy logo or this amazing branding or whatever. And a lot of times they're doing the same things, but measurement on the performance side has always been easier. because it's a direct line in a lot of ways, where the gray stuff, the innovation, it kind of happens on the rails, outside of just the straight line. But in general, it's a it's a great way to approach it and to continue to learn about digital marketing and marketing in general. And I think
Yeah.
it's funny because a lot of our tactics have come full circle. Sending somebody a direct mail piece now might have more trust because it took actual, like $1 to send them that direct mail piece, or to see a billboard on the side of the road. It's like, well, it must be a legit company in order to put that billboard up there. Maybe I'll call them about my home service need or something. Um, it's just really interesting to try to vibe on what are those tactics that build trust. Obviously, there's a great brand, there's great graphic design, there's concise and consistent messaging and things like that. How are you guys measuring whether or not you're on the right track with your clients?
Yeah. Great comments and question. I would say there's a really interesting thing that's happening, and I think I've talked about this on my pod and our business and our newsletter. And one of the things that we're seeing with these clients is that a lot of them, if you set up, even if you go beyond the default settings of a lot of these performance channels, Google and Meta are really good at claiming credit where they're not necessarily delivering that value. It's kind of, I don't think it's talked about nearly enough. And yes, that can happen in any marketing lever. You talked about a little bit about the branding versus direct response, right? You alluded to that. I think that um, we're sort of seeing going back to like what was, what was old, what is new, et cetera, that we're kind of going back to some of those things a little bit in that the world went nuts with data in the last 15 years. We had access to it. It looked good. It gave us dopamine hits. We looked into our reporting and go, holy cow, I drove 5 conversions for $100. This is amazing. Pump more money into it. And that is what got us here. Like Nike is a really interesting example where they really chase programmatic. I know there's more to that story around their merchant strategy and their logistics and et cetera. But if you look at their marketing, they're never going to leave performance marketing. They're never going to leave programmatic. But boy, have they in the last year woken up to the value of measuring it, I think, a little bit more intelligently and really making sure the story value is there to be part of that trust message. So just zooming out, the context here I think is really important. Think about where are we in this whole life cycle of these things. And I think there's been a little bit of a return and a wake up call to people to say, how do we look at this attribution? How do we look at this incrementality? I mean, the clients we see sometimes when we do these audits or help counsel them when we first talk to them, or even if they're mature, it's like you are giving way too much credit to Google and Meta, or
Right.
you're giving way too much credit to individual affiliates. We love coming in and saving you money. And, candidly, the trust oftentimes starts with someone like yourself, someone like me. Um, just being an honest broker to guide you kind of through that stuff because you can get lost in it quickly with brands of all shapes and sizes. And so I think a lot of that trust comes from you asked about the data and the metrics. I think I'm really happy to see an increase in people being aware of the tooling available, being aware of the importance of attribution, being aware of the importance of incrementality. These things need to be defined. Are we attributing these channels effectively across the different tests and bets and campaigns we're running? Incrementality. If we turn it off, is it actually going to get that sale anyway? Then it's not incremental and providing kind of scoring to them. So we try to guide our clients through those things. We try to have things like everything from either a mixed panel or a GA4 or an Adobe Analytics, instrumented the right way, at least validated with a data scientist or someone on their team with our team. Um, just defining and talking about those terms efficiently it sounds very simple, but there's a lot of it's an insane amount of brands and companies, I'm sure you've seen it as well in your business, that are just either flying blind or think they know what they don't know. And so that's a big part of it. I think the other piece I want to kind of touch on is, we the matchmaking piece is really important in affiliate and influencer. And so getting that price right, getting that match between brand and affiliate. or brand and influencer, um, you might have some element of it to be consideration or awareness based. But guess what? We're really going to look at revenue. We're really going to look at engagement. We're not going to just look at follower count. We want to see that, they've got engagement. They've got there is a just a genuine interest and excitement about the product, and like,
Yeah.
we could even tap into existing customers to do that. That's a great way to say, hey, this influencer or this affiliate is already bought in so much that they've literally paid for your product, their service. They're a
How do you
great person to advocate for you.
how do you incorporate that into your discovery process of trying to match the right influencers? I heard a story a couple of weeks ago, and I know this has been around out for a while, but it's the story of how Dana White in UFC, speaking of Austin, how they
Yep.
selected Joe Rogan to be the voice of UFC. And
Ooh.
I
Yeah.
remember, Dana White was, and this was before Joe Rogan had his most popular podcast and everything, and it was
Yep.
basically he learned that Joe, like, had a true passion for UFC, and he actually volunteered to be the voice of it at no charge, just so he could be ringside and experience the fights, and he was
Yeah.
highly knowledgeable. He's truly passionate about it, and it's like that's a great example of, in my opinion, like, the best person for the job, you know?
Yeah. I love that. And it reminded me in the ancient days, because I'm a little older than some of the other performance marketers out there. I was lucky enough to be at eBay, part of the team that was building out a great global affiliate program. It was hands down the most sophisticated, well-funded, well-established. They had everything you could possibly imagine. And there was this little blog called Bring a Trailer that came along that talked about classic cars and, Porsches and barn finds and old trucks, and talk about passion. I mean, it just, jumped off the page. There was each car had a story. There was this great mix of like the founder and the technologist, and um, what else. I'll try to keep it, somewhat succinct here, but we we saw them growing in the ranks in the affiliate program. We met with them. We strategized. We said, well, how can we improve this? We kind of There was a lot of work and optimization going on. But one of my proudest memories of this world of affiliate was, which is it's kind of influencer tangential. They said we kind of collaborated on an idea to take an old '60s Corvette barn find, turn it over to the community, and say, what do you guys want to do with this? We're gonna use eBay was going through a transition strategically to emphasize parts, better margin, better profit, more velocity. So it was just after the Great Recession, so not too, it wasn't like people were flush with cash. Um, Vehicles were still available on eBay Motors, but parts was the priority. So how do we push this with the affiliate program? Well, we did it by saying, hey, we're going to rebuild this barn find Corvette from all eBay Motors parts. And so the community just went wild and was making comments, making suggestions, and really bringing this story to life. This was a hundreds. I mean, I think there was hundreds of pages written about it. There was probably, I think I want to say over 20 posts on it dedicated. This was a multi-year project. So talk about long-term thinking, aligned incentives, an authentic voice, a passionate community. It had all of that. And it was also generating a lot of revenue for both parties. And eventually, Bring a Trailer became its own brand, its own entity, its own great thing. They're offering auctions now, just alongside eBay. So it's a kind of a fascinating story of the power of authenticity. And I could talk all day about it, but like now people outside of marketing are recognizing this influencer power. It's nuts.
I wanna double tap that for just a second. So what were those meetings like? Like, how did you guys know? Like, how did it come up when you're meeting with the Bring a Trailer people? How did you know that you were onto something really cool?
I mean, I say this a lot, but the affiliates and the influencers are in a big way the currency and the power and the bread and butter of the industry. They are the ones that are really doing the lion's share of the work. Um, you kind of it's this beautiful mix of like there's small bunch of small businesses and some of them become quite big businesses. You know, they supersede the brands sometimes that they promote. Um, now, so in particular, um, they knew what they had. I think they saw. I think they started to see traction significantly in the community. I think it started to work. Um, geographically, there we were close, candidly. Multiple people within the organization saw an opportunity in terms of the numbers. Um,
What
they were just great to work with. They were really understood, and there was an openness and a trust level. And I think that's what I observed. I wasn't obviously the only one driving the conversation. It was a team effort to say the least.
I mean, it does
But
seem like what you're saying is there's like a common sense element of like, wait a second, like this is gonna be pretty convenient to pull this off. This may or may not work. It's gonna be pretty cool, but there's like maybe they're nearby, maybe they're fun, they're great collaborators. They value your partnership. Um, there's synergies there, right? And so
uh,
it's like
go on.
it's like if we're gonna innovate, we might as well do it with people who are like we're all rowing together.
Totally. And I think you kind of touched on it earlier. Some of these interactions don't click like this one did. And it's important to trust your gut on some of those things. The other piece I want to call out, this really didn't maybe hit through all the way, but yes, this is very direct response. Yes, this is very performance based, but talk about hitting the nail on the head for telling what was important to telling a story that was important to eBay's strategic initiatives. But guess what? It also came genuinely from the voice of the influencer. And yes, they had to kind of weave a story around parts and eBay specifically. And I think the audience understood this wasn't just, this was a paid deal, which goes into the whole FTC requirements, which we can talk about legally later,
Yeah,
whatever they have to disclose. But this was telling a great story for the brand.
yeah.
Wasn't just self-serving. This wasn't just give me the clicks and the performance and the revenue. This was like a great way to tell that story brand wise. And so I think that's an important thing to call it as well.
Yeah, and it's a popular story. There's magazines built around restoring cars and just that whole
Mhm.
passion
And I think the
around.
cool thing that people don't always realize is like you may not have a classic car website, you may not be an eBay in terms of like your budget size, but trust me, there's a lot of cool ways to unlock this if you've got a little bit of creativity, a little bit of budget, and a little bit of thoughtfulness to come up with something that is exciting about this and tapping into the right people. So um, I don't think enough brands do it right generally and also think about this in these terms.
Well, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, but you've got a lot of experience. You're gonna be fine. So literally today in our agency, we're here in Tampa. It is Cigar City. There's a district here in Tampa
Hmm,
called Ybor City. It's spelled with a Y. It's super cool. It's got had all these Cuban immigrants from 100 years ago,
I'm
150 years
sold.
ago, and anyhow, there's some brands of cigars that come out of that area that are world class. And we were doing some market research because there's a brand that we're going to meet with in the next couple of weeks that we want to impress. And so we've done some comp video. And one of the things we were doing is we're looking at their Instagram feed, trying to get a feel for, what they've done in the past and what's been successful. There's been some promotions around giving away things that are like highly regarded, like, oh my God, like that's a really expensive cigar or a wonderful like sample pack of like these sticks you'd pay $200 for or something. And there was a lot of that, but the feed was full of history. It was full of old pictures of the
Hmm,
founders, things like that, and a lot of what I'm calling like cigar porn, where it's like, a cigar next to a nice glass of whiskey or something like that. But
mhm.
in digesting it all, it does definitely looked redundant. And so we were like, how can we bring some fresh ideas? So we started to explore what are some other popular cigar brands doing um, to generate a following and things like that. And one of the things we noticed was some of them were using beautiful models, like, here's the lifestyle and look at these beautiful ladies. They might be Latin ladies or whatever. Here's,
Hmm.
amazing trips around the world. People are going to these exotic places and they want to smoke a cigar. Like, there's all these like genres of like
Hmm.
lifestyle and success because there's like that associated thing with,
Hmm.
if you can smoke a $50 cigar, like you must can afford it, right? And so
Yeah.
anyhow, we saw a lot of that, but on this feed, it wasn't. And that word authenticity and that vibe around what is truly authentic really, really was true. It was pure. And so again, we were challenged like, how do we grow their audience? I think they had 50 or 60,000 followers, but like Cigar Aficionado magazine only has 250,000. So, you're talking about the most popular magazine in the genre, and it's like the universe of people is 250,000 people or maybe 300,000, right? We're just going to assume they have almost all of them.
Sure.
And so we were exploring it. And so, what advice would you give somebody like us, in trying to develop or present some innovative strategies to such a classic strategy? How do you enhance something that's so classic?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I mean, I think something that people don't always think about is getting into the mind of the consumer as much as possible. So obviously thinking about, okay, what are you trying to achieve? What are your guardrails, budget, goal, timelines? Um, who are those that are really like passionate? Who are those customers that are going to be really resonating with this? Are they even on XYZ social media? If they are, why? Like I think going really getting into those segments and understanding those customers because um, I think being thoughtful about how you're engaging with them, getting there's probably I would hypothesize there's probably some non-conventional or surprising social handles that you could kind of think about collaborating with that aren't necessarily like, you know, the whiskeys of the world or the, traditional of the world. And I think the more in depth you can go as it is to understand what are they trying to do and keep it focused on the consumer. If we were able to come up with like a phenomenal customer segment map or buyer persona type thinking, I think that opens up the opportunity to kind of think outside the box and go, okay, look, this is not the normal. We're going to go out and find other just great brands to think about partnering with. Um, and obviously, I'm going to come at from the partner marketing lens. I think something that a lot of people don't always realize is brand to brand is something to think about. And obviously, in the collaboration world, um, you've got brands that have massive followings that go well beyond cigar aficionado. So I wouldn't want to limit ourselves to certainly that ecosystem. I would want to think of it as let's think about brand to brand in a way that's bigger. Um, and I think being able to take some risk, obviously, that's a hard one. But I think with different tests and different audiences of those segments that you do have, I think you have to take some swings a little bit to think about, hey, let's go out and try something that's maybe more of a marketing stunt. Let's do maybe a bigger giveaway. Let's do something live, and maybe entertainment based. Um, are there like iconic, movie scenes of cigars or celebrity things that we can include and not get dinged on? And I think thinking about the different use cases of now, like where are people doing this? Is it
Yeah.
on a golf course? Is it with the guys for guys weekend? Is the female market underserved? Can we expand that more effectively? So these are some more of the questions I would ask. I don't know if it necessarily gives you the
No,
zinger opportunity that you're
it,
looking for, but hopefully that helps give you a
no,
sense of how we might think about it.
it totally does. Like those were some of the thoughts, and of course we used AI and deep research to find all those things. It's like that's one of the
Yeah,
coolest new tools is being able to let loose a generative AI model. It's like the same work that
yeah,
an intern would take 2 months to do. You can do in 30
yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
But,
Hopefully my authentic answer is somewhat close to AI
yeah,
research, but we'll
yeah,
see.
but those were some of the ideas, like, ideas we had were, how do we get other brands, how do we do product placement in a very authentic way, not a flashy way, on other brands' feeds? You know, things like that where we're showing up where it's like they're fans of us. It's, you know, because it's always better to have somebody else talk about you than you talk about yourself. But
That's it.
how can we do it in a way that's really authentic and maybe potentially reach a lot more people? Like, hey, what is that whiskey brand, from, you know, somewhere in Tennessee or whatever that, that is the most authentic? Who is our, twin, our doppelganger in another, like, fine spirits world or whatnot?
Yeah. We have kind of complementary brand opportunities in,
Yeah,
clothing, vacation, sports. There's so many intriguing, great, male centric brands if that's the direction you're going in with the cigar, which is clearly,
yeah,
a reality. Golf brands, there's a huge just growth of golf content out there. It's really
yeah.
fat, good stuff. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, Callaway. There's all these emerging brands that you could partner with. Yeah, we can talk more about brand to brand. There's things that we're doing, and philosophically, I think it's kind of tied to, you kind of have refer a friend, you have brand to brand, you have influencer, you have affiliate. All of these things are very similar, and I think um, you're kind of speaking to that a little bit structurally with this opportunity. So
I love it, I love it. We're on the
yeah,
same page. You'd have been proud of my prompt.
yes,
It
can't
said a
wait to
lot of
see
those
it.
things. Well, let's talk about, so speaking of that and navigating some of those waters, we used to call it a BS filter. You know, the nice way to say it is skepticism. You know, like there's such a skeptic. The world is filled with skeptics, especially on social media. It's so easy to stand up a good-looking presence, that, uh, you know, just having great creative doesn't differentiate you the same way it used to in terms of quality and things like that. How do you guys? How do you guys filter? Like, what is a good, red flag detector? Like, how do you avoid the wrong kind of affiliate or the wrong kind of influencers?
Yeah, I think a couple things, right? We just found foundationally, there's some things that may sound obvious, but they matter. We've been in the game for a long time. Business has been around for 10 years. We tend to hire people that are pretty damn good at this world and are not necessarily like fresh out of college, and we're trying to kind of like teach them to fish, to be candid. That's just kind of where we're at in terms of our kind of boutique size and care. And I think that just kind of, it gives us a chance to, I think, to have a little bit, hopefully, sound judgment and taste on like, okay, does this pass the sniff test? That's an important aspect of it, to just to call it out. Um, our database has been around a bit, it's been built up over years. We look at things like engagement and not just the follower count. It's not rocket science, but there's also tooling out there. I have to maybe share with you later the names of them, but basically being able to kind of go, okay, are they doing some shady things to kind of pump up not just their followers but their engagement? That's kind of come up a lot more. And then obviously the revenue generated, we can see a lot of that historical, either from experience directly or through some of the data we can collect. As you kind of alluded to, AI is helping us in this. There's a number of tools out there that help. Um, but those are some foundational things. And then I think what we've developed internally, and honestly, we haven't really. This is the first pod we've really talked about is a trust score. Um, we're looking at a lot of data internally in this database, and a lot of it is great to say, well, this affiliate or this influencer has a trust level. That's fantastic. But if you throw the cigar brand matched with them versus maybe a women's apparel brand, the trust score is going to be quite different.
Yeah.
We're developing that to make sure that it accounts for the brand that you're partnering with, not just the standalone of the site, um, like an SEO score would, or even its
I
Google score.
I love hearing about that. You know, one of my earliest experiences in branding was in radio, back when radio was a thing in the mid 90s. And I remember I was an intern and I was talking to a program manager, and he was talking about how important it is to be on brand. Like you're talking about the influencer, the health brand, the cigar brand, like those things are not congruent for the most part.
Yeah.
Like there's some dudes that work out and probably smoke a cigar. That's probably about the only time that they kind of click together. But it is one of those things where like if you have a rock and roll station and it's call it classic rock, and then all of a sudden you play maybe like a Jackson 5 song. Well, that's kind of like rock, but it's really Motown. It's kind of pop, things like that. And
Yep.
then if you play like a country song, it's also a little bit off target. And
Yep.
so you're instantly just by your voice, like what you're messaging, you might break trust because you've gone off message. It's like people just now they'll change the dial. It's like, wait a second, that's not what I expected. I'm going to change the dial, and
Hmm.
now you've weakened your trust scores with people, and it. But it
Yeah.
was just one of those pure examples. I love the older examples in business that really helped drive home the importance of consistency and
Yeah.
being something that people expect.
Yep. Yeah. No, and I think what's tied to that is, this movement of like user generated content. I don't necessarily want to go down fully that rabbit hole, but I think it's a really good example where, sometimes the influencer work can be utilized as a content creation mechanism to whitelist into your meta ad strategy. We're actually seeing it not only is connected TV becoming part of our affiliate playbook because we can get it on a CPA for certain brands, meaning they don't have to pay flat fee, but we're seeing this influencer and UGC creative kind of coming in. So like, this whole movement of like trust and third party, and people are saying, yeah, I'd rather get a recommendation from someone individual, even if it's not someone I know, over a brand. It's like quite high. It's like it's north of 80%. So this is just kind of permeating things. Now, is it going to always be the norm? We're going to see some reversion back. Certainly, people are kind of seeing some stuff that gives them, the icks, as they say, is like, oh, that feels kind of fake or that feels kind of contrived. Okay,
Right. The X.
but but I think that like, you know, it's here and it's happening. The fact that it's kind of entering our big screen, I think, is fascinating. You're probably going to probably start seeing it more on print if you're already, already not already.
Yeah, there are some really impressive print pieces out there that build a lot of trust. I was I don't know how it happened. Maybe I walked into a Land Rover dealership or something. I can't afford one. But I
Fun to
I,
look at
uh,
them.
I got, like,
Test
this
drive.
direct mail piece that it was
Oh,
almost like 18 inches by 12 inches, and it was just some of the most beautiful it put National Geographic to shame. And I remember, like, handing it to my wife going because we're in the advertising business, I'm like, "Man, this is one of the nicest direct mail pieces I've ever gotten in my life, and if I was gonna buy a luxury SUV, I'd be definitely looking at a Land Rover." Like, it was just the most
yeah.
amazing first impression to me. And, and it I think it's important to stand out and do it in an authentic way. Where else do you see the industry going? I mean, you're obviously at the forefront of working with influencers. I definitely want to hear a little bit more about that. Like, how do you actually source influencers? And it's okay if you say, hey, you call Round Barn, but like, how do you uh, curate those relationships? Because it seems like every single influencer is different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a little bit of call around barn. Appreciate the shout out, but I think it is also, we, you know, we want to kind of use the whole suite of things to bring to bear for a project. And I think, I think that there's a lot of networks out there that help if you have deeper pockets. Um, LTK is a good example where they'll put together anything, everything for you, um, and kind of do it end to end. And they've done quite well in consumer and fashion, cosmetics. They're quite large. I think they're based here in Texas as well. They've done an amazing job. Mavely is another one I think has kind of risen the ranks and done a fantastic job building out a lot of the tech and the discovery tools. Um, we are we're seeing great success on Creator Co. Just kind of tangentially, kind of more the tracking platform sourcing side. Um, Little shout out to them. We are tapping into that a lot. I mentioned our database earlier. That's something we continue to add to and build. And a lot of times we try to go direct as much as possible. Um, some of these tools are in overlapping disciplines, so I don't want to say they're all the same, but um, and honestly, AI, we're tapping into AI. We ran I told someone this earlier today. We ran a contest internally to kind of come up with some great ideas and reward people for those great ideas. And it was phenomenal to see what people came up with and the use cases. It's making sourcing easier. It's making validation easier. It's not obviously an end all be all. It's a good directional. But to have a database of 10,000 partners and growing, with real data, with trust score, with engagement on affiliate and influencer, it helps a lot. And so we're not as reliant on the more expensive, bigger network type style buys. We can go direct to a lot of them
Yeah.
as much as we can when they don't have an agent intermediary. Um, so I would say that's some of the how behind it. I think that you do want to kind of look at things fairly holistically, like, hey, let's look at some of the tooling. How did people come to you? Are some of these already your buyers?
Should
Are we seeing this in SERP? Are we using the right SERP tools to see where they're showing up or where they're not? So those are some things that hopefully are helpful directionally.
if you're a marketing agency or a brand or an agency, would you recommend always trying to connect with the influencer directly first before you try to go through the agencies? Or is there value in that?
When the influencer is kind of has a designated agent, um, it's probably going to be the best way. Um, I think that you know it is a cat herding exercise, and if you don't have the budget, time, headcount dedicated to it, depending on what size of business you're at, it might make sense to say, hey, Brown or other agency, go do it for me. Um, Obviously, that increase your costs, but so does building out an internal
Of
ability to
course.
do that. Um, some brands we certainly are happy to guide in terms that they're not ready, like kind of give them some coaching, help them point them in the right direction. So like open to doing that of like, hey, how do you kind of get something started? Maybe validate. Maybe you get 100 listed out. Maybe you able to pull them out manually with the help of some support and some AI, and you say, hey, we're going to go after them. We're going to offer them something compelling. For this year, maybe it's a pretty sweet gift offer. But it's tricky kind of balancing that. Do they have the size? Do they have the volume to justify that? And is that reward high enough? Is there an ROI there for you? So um, those are some ways to maybe think about it initially. And definitely, I recommend some validation. Direct would be great, but oftentimes it's hard to pull off.
Yeah, I think no matter what, as we talk about the future and where we're going, I think no matter what, I'm sure you agree with me, but it's like every single brand needs to have some element of influencer marketing.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts. I mean, just in the last 5 years or so, B2B SaaS didn't really have affiliate or influencer involved. And I mean, to an extent, they did, but it's like the fastest growing area we're seeing, and we're fortunate to be part of that as well as the great consumer market. Um, you know, uh, you have it's kind of it's a weird movement that's kind of taken over. I think a lot of that part due to that lack of trust. And I think going back to that core thing, they want that some degree of validation from a third party to say
Yeah.
say you're great as opposed to you. They just people don't trust like they used to. I think there's just more noise, more competition, more stuff out there, and um I think you hit the nail on the head. I think if you're not, I only see these budgets going up, most of these allocations going up. There's a lot of interest around it. We're finding brands are really amenable to add-on, like adding it into their program or testing it or getting, investing in it heavily. Um, yeah, so I think hopefully that helps.
Yeah, well, it totally does. How about your, in terms of platforms, obviously there's, your typical social media platforms, but I mean, it's not that they necessarily get stale, but they have a shelf life. The post can just disappear from the internet because it's not fresh enough. Whereas you've got platforms like YouTube where the content lives forever. And I can, I mean, at least in my case, anytime I'm about to spend a lot of money on something, whether it's something for the business or personal, I am spending a lot of time on YouTube researching, looking at reviews and things like that. And my goodness, like most of the videos I'm watching have to do with influencers.
Yeah, you nailed it. For consumer tech, for a lot of the B2B brands, even for a lot of the e-com pieces. I think end of last year, I'm one of those, silly people that thinks I'm worthy of doing our predictions, and I enjoy it. So we actually did really well last year. Looking back, we scored ourselves on it in my little newsletter and kind of. But my point is like YouTube is, I think, one of the biggest opportunities right now. And I've seen some of the incrementality testing data come out from some of the notable platforms like House. They'll talk about like, hey, you don't sleep on YouTube. From a is it driving conversion? Is it driving actual incremental value perspective? Um, Certainly for the creator world, I think it's a must have. And like for your and I pod world, for you and me, it's now overtaken. It's now number one for pod. So it's kind of a no brainer. I think it's become, you've got some trackability, but it's not necessarily trying to by default take too much credit. You have to look at it appropriately, but yeah, don't sleep on it, and definitely want to have it be part of your mix.
What advice would you give to a brand that probably needs to do these tactics, but is just not getting started? Like, how do they get off the couch? How do they get off the couch and get started doing some of these tactics?
Yeah, maybe a little different based on the size and stage and product, but um, I think it's a great question. I think I think focus, documentation, um, setting some basic goals and saying like, hey, this is what I think we can get. Maybe it's one influencer on YouTube a quarter. And just keep it low bar and ability to hit that objective. Maybe it's one a month, maybe it's less. um, if you're not, it's hard because if you're not really allocating a budget line item to something, it's hard to really get it done, whether you're hiring somebody for it, full or part-time, or you're working with a third party consultant or an agency. um, but I think once you do that, then it's like, hey, uh, don't don't let it perfect be the enemy of the good, I think, is the great creator mantra. And I think keeping it regular on a steady cadence is another great creator mantra that you and I have to deal with in our own world too. So um, I think those are good. And set up the measurement the right way. Put your hypotheses down, document that. That's a big part
Yeah.
of kind of my always be testing philosophy of like, you got to have those tracking systems validated before you go live, because you hate to see it go out and not be able to capture that. Do some thoughtfulness around how you're going to capture people. Think about the user, what are they going to do once they listen to it? Is it even actionable, or is it more on the awareness consideration side? So is that through a code or a vanity URL, or do you even have the ability to track it through GA4? All of those things, I think, just get that little checklist, get the document going, and don't be afraid to jump in and try it.
There you go. I mean, it definitely, I hear what you're saying. There's a lot of things that you should set up first. It's not just about velocity then direction. It's like, hey, let's do this. Let's do it the right way. Let's make sure that we understand who we are so we're not embarrassing ourselves, but we still need to just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good is another great one. I know it's a cliche, but
Yeah.
it's real. And you're not going to get it right on day one. It's going to get better over time. And If you can tap into existing fans, even better. That's where a lot of that authenticity is dropped, or perhaps prospective ones that people that are clearly raising your hand to be like, I'm fired up to go to a UFC show or a fight. I'm
Yeah.
fired up to go on a vacation with my family to Bali. I'm fired up to try on this t-shirt because it's a particular band that I listen to. Like, it's there's those fans exist in this world 'cause that's the one of the beauties of the digital crazy world we live in versus 100 years ago. It's like it's easy to find a fan of the most niche of niches. So let them come in and interact with you.
It's a really important part of being a person too. The AI doesn't really have passion the way we do, and, thank
Yeah,
God for that. Um,
I think that's the best. It's a great point. I love that, and that's why I joked about it recently. We're not going anywhere just yet.
until the robots get here.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Ty, thanks for joining us. Where can people follow you and your thought leadership?
Oh man, it's been a pleasure. Just appreciate you so much. It's been fun learning about you, chords, and getting to know you. And easiest way to find me is probably on LinkedIn, Tye DeGrange. If they want to check out our business, what we're working on, Round Barn Labs. I enjoy the pod world too. Always be testing. It's been a lot of fun. We have some good conversations there, and we also like to do stuff with our newsletter. You can find it all on my website, the Round Barn Labs website, or me on LinkedIn. So that's all easy to do.
Well, we'll definitely follow you there, Ty. And thank you guys for joining us. You can find us anywhere where podcasts are found on the Bake More Pies and Law of Relevance social media feeds. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.